German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has said he assumes Russia stands behind many of the drones sighted over Germany this weekend. "Our assumption is that Russia is behind most of these drone flights," Merz said in a statement to Reuters. The German leader added that the drones appeared to be conducting reconnaissance flights and that none of the drones spotted so far had been armed. The Chancellor called the number of incursions in other European countries unprecedented, even compared to during the Cold War. The drone sightings over Germany's airspace caused the closing of Munich main airport over the weekend, disrupting a large number of flights and leaving thousands of passengers stranded. 46 departures from the airport had to be cancelled or delayed until Saturday, affecting 6,500 passengers. The work of the airport, one of Europe's largest, was suspended after drone sighting on Thursday and resumed operations on early Saturday. At least 19 Lufthansa flights were affected, either cancelled or rerouted, because of the airport suspension. Europe has been on high alert due to multiple drone sightings over its airspace since last month. In early August, Polish and NATO allies downed multiple Russian decoy drones that breached Poland's airspace in an incident that Warsaw described as deliberate incursion by Russia. Drones were also sighted over Romania, Denmark, Norway, while Estonia reported the violation of its airspace by Russian MiG-31 aircraft. Earlier on October 3, Czech authorities reported drone activity near Prague's Václav Havel airport. It should be noted that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy has suggested that intelligence suggests Russia's so-called shadow fleet of oil tankers is being used to operate and guide Russian drones over European cities. Germany's Spiegel publication reported on October 2 that investigators are looking into possible connections between the unidentified drones recently sighted across northern Germany. Drone sightings over various European countries prompted the EU leader to initiate a drone wall project to protect its skies from incursions.
British intelligence began sharing data with Kyiv for long-range strikes on Russian territory. According to the Financial Times, this followed a direct request from Washington to provide assistance to Ukraine. Sources claim that the US is pushing other NATO partners to take this step, given that it previously announced its willingness to share information from satellites and other surveillance systems with Ukraine. Meanwhile, the British military reports that Russia is aware of London's actions. Recently, they have increasingly encountered attempts to jam British satellites in space. General Paul Tedman, head of the UK Space Command, claims that Russia does this on an ongoing basis, while simultaneously collecting data from the devices. Previously, the Russian side noted that talk of a potential transfer of long-range Tomahawk missiles was not just a matter of chance. Similar statements had previously been made when the weapons were already in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin emphasized that the use of American missiles is impossible without the direct involvement of US military forces, which would mark a new stage of escalation, including in relations between Moscow and Washington. Ukrainians know that this affects not only the Russians on the front lines, but also the West's perception of how things are going in Ukraine. Clark explained. According to the expert, the Ukrainian armed forces may attempt a massive attack on Russian territory by the end of the year, with Crimea being one of the main targets. Ukrainians are preparing for the frontline zone to become wet, muddy, and unsuitable for effective combat in the coming months. Therefore, it's possible they could spring a few surprises on Russia before winter. For example, they could launch a massive attack on Crimea. British military analyst Michael Clark stated. According to the expert, the Ukrainian military may resort to massive shelling of Crimea or attempt to land amphibious forces on the peninsula to disrupt the Russian armed forces. And given the Ukrainian armed forces' long-range strike capabilities, it's possible they will again attempt to destroy the Kerch Bridge. If the US does not decide to supply Tomahawk missiles, Ukraine will be able to strike Russian targets more effectively. The missiles are quite accurate and can fly at low altitudes, so they consume little. However, it's more likely that they won't be used against Crimea, as that would be unjustified from a military standpoint. Russia is gradually exhausting the resources necessary for a protracted war, and the situation in the country is approaching a critical point. Despite the Kremlin's attempts to maintain control, the prospect of a protracted conflict is becoming increasingly remote. U.S. Army Colonel John Sweet stated this on Channel 24. He asserted that even a new wave of mobilization will not bring the Kremlin a strategic advantage, as modern technology makes army size less decisive in combat. The world emphasized that Russian society, which has lived under economic restrictions for years, is increasingly less willing to endure. We are approaching a turning point. Polls show that around 75% of the population supports negotiations to end the war. Furthermore, food and water shortages are expected, and the strikes on the oil refineries further strengthen Ukraine's position, he noted. The broadcast also recalled that the US is considering transferring Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine. General Keith Kellogg explained that these missiles will enable precision strikes against strategically important military targets in Russia and will complement Ukraine's existing drones and other strike systems, reducing the Kremlin's ability to support the front with resources. The impact of the Ukrainian attacks is already noticeable. Approximately 25% of Russian oil refining capacity has been damaged over the past week. This means that approximately 1 million barrels of fuel are not reaching the front lines daily, creating shortages at gas stations, rising prices, and significantly hampering fuel deliveries to Moscow and occupied Crimea. Sweet noted that Ukraine's success depends on a combination of defensive and offensive measures. An effective air defense system, strikes on airfields and military factories, and funding restrictions for the Russian military. He added that social pressure, military casualties, and economic sanctions could force the Kremlin to reconsider its strategy and bring closer the moment of real negotiations. The colonel noted that Ukraine's continued attacks on Russia's energy and oil infrastructure only deplete the enemy's resources, but also create conditions for a turning point in the war that could determine the conflict's future course. As a reminder, Putin threatened the United States with a new level of escalation if Ukraine uses Tomahawk missiles. He claimed that Ukraine's use of Tomahawk missiles without the direct involvement of American troops was impossible.